Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Work to Wealth podcast. I'm Taylor, and I'm here with my co host Faith. And we have our first interview guest today, my friend Sam, coming to talk about her social work journey. We're going to talk about some money stuff, debt stuff. We're gonna get into it all. So, yeah, Sam, just give us a little background, little info about like what you do now, your journey to where you're at.
Okay. I am Sam. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have my bachelor's and my master's in social work. And I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more, but I got my bachelor's in Georgia, where I'm from. So I got my bachelor's at Georgia State University, then got my master's at Louisiana State University, worked my way through getting my LCSW, and I'm currently in Oregon working on an organ procurement program as a donor family advocate.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit more, maybe what your first job was out of like your master's, and kind of your job progression and what you kind of have done and how you ended up getting into the line of work you do now?
Yeah, so I can start at the very beginning.
Do it. We love hearing from the beginning.
Okay, okay. I was living in Athens, Georgia. I didn't go to UGA, but I was kind of like was never really good at school. All through high school, I was way more focused on my social life and just never really cared about academics.
Same.
Never cared, I also have a learning disability. I'm dyslexic, so I was also like struggling with that, like feeling like I was dumb, but also like I had gotten like pretty much through high school and all the way through college, I would always get this feedback like from my teachers, like when we talk in class, you understand the material, but for some reason when you sit down and do the test, you don't do well. I don't understand what's going on. So I never figured that out until I got to college. I never really had like a teacher that went, "Hey, I think you're dyslexic." So anyways, I'll say all that to say, when I was 19, I noticed everybody around me was a lot farther along in their life. And in the grand scheme of things, it's hilarious because I was only like 6 months behind everybody. Like I took 6 months off after high school and worked for my dad, and then all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, I'm getting left behind. I have to do something. So I went to like a little community college in Athens where a whole bunch of my friends were. And I had around the time that I was 21, I had lost a family member that like really rocked my whole life. And it sent me to therapy. And a tip for everybody out there, if you're having a tough time in college, your college most likely has free therapists there for you, which was a huge game changer for me. I was like, oh my God, I can go to therapy for free. And at that point, like, I only knew one person that ever went to therapy, and it was my friend Hannah. My friend Hannah, who I'm so fortunate had been in my life at that time. We lived together in Athens. Her brother is a recovering drug addict, and at that moment, he was in the thick of his drug addiction. And she went and saw the therapist at school, recommended that I go, and that therapist within 2 sessions was like, "Hey, what are you doing with your life? Because I think you're a social worker and you don't know it."
Oh,
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay." Oh yeah, have I
Okay.
ever told you this, Taylor?
no.
Yeah, and I went down a huge rabbit hole trying to find this lady's name again and her phone number. Like I can picture her therapist office, the waterfall in the back, like the little like water fixture in the background. Like I can picture all of that, but I can't remember her name because I just want to send her a thank you letter.
Amazing.
I know she
Amazing.
completely, it has, we all have been taught so many things, and it's so funny to think about it now because she totally interjected herself into my life and was like, "Hold up,
Yeah.
you need to explore this." And I was like, "Okay." And so she taught the intro to social work class. And that was it. Like I did that class and I was like, I am a social worker. This is what I'm supposed to do. how can I get into this? Because I was always motivated by helping people, but I never really got like any actual career advice from somebody.
Yeah.
Neither of my parents went to college. You know, they worked blue collar jobs pretty much my whole life, and so nobody was really like in academics in my family, or like, you know what I'm saying.
When you got that, when you were going through that first class and you kind of knew, what was that feeling like for you? Like, what feeling came up for you when you were like, this is what I'm supposed to do? Like, I know this is what I'm supposed to do. What did that feel like when you finally figured it out, or you were in that class? Like, what was that feeling?
I don't know. It was almost like, it was like a light bulb moment for me. You know, and at that time I was like 21, 22, and I know I didn't have these words then, but it was like, oh, I finally completed a puzzle. Like, I was never good at math. I've never been good at chemistry, but I always wanted to either be a doctor or a surgeon or like all of these things. And as I was moving like through college, I was like, I can't pass these classes. Like, how am I ever going to do OChem, you know? But I knew, I always wanted to help people, and I had been helping people my whole life. Like, I've always been that friend. Like, I could call my mom right now and she would tell you, like, all of my friends all through middle school would call me for advice. I would be on the phone with my best friend for an hour figuring out why her and this girl were fighting, like, you know, and it was like a light bulb moment.
Cool.
So I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do.
That's awesome. That's such a cool moment. I think that, you know, Taylor and I have talked about too, for each of us, like that moment when you figure out, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to help people, and you get into the industry. So tell us more about, like, from grad school. So wait, you were 21. Were you an undergrad at that point then still?
Yeah. I was behind because I was like flunking my classes. I was not doing well in college because I was really depressed. I was, you know, drinking. I'm 21, so I'm like running around Athens, Georgia, which might as well be a 21-year-old playground. And all of my friends were doing the same thing, you know what I mean? And so around 22 or 23, it's hard I think 2023, I knew that I had to go to a different school because the school that I was at didn't offer social work as a bachelor's program. And again, luckily, that therapist that I was seeing was like, hey, if you get your bachelor's, you can skip the first year of grad school in the advanced standing program. So just plow through all of this and you'll be done. And I was like, okay, so I won't be too far behind because unfortunately our society, you know, really puts that pressure on us. So I got into Georgia State University, which was in Atlanta. So I moved to Atlanta, moved in with my friend Stephanie, who is in the very similar situation as me. She was kind of meandering around, not really knowing what she wanted to do. So we both got in at the same time and moved to Atlanta together. And it's so funny to think about our like curriculums that we have in school and through college and grad school, because the moment that I started taking all of my social work classes, I made straight A's. So it's like you can literally look at my transcript and go, okay, well, Sam does okay in English, but does terrible in math, and then all of a sudden I'm making straight A's. It's wild because I don't know. I was engaged. I don't know. You guys get it.
Yeah.
Like I'm doing something that
that you enjoy and you
yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. For a long time, I thought I wanted to work with kids. So I have to tell you that because that's kind of where my first job, it will all make sense here in a little bit. I thought I wanted to work with kids. So I worked my first internship in grad school because we had to do our practicum.
Right.
Our last year was at an agency for behaviorally difficult foster care children. And it was wild. Absolutely wild. I was also taking sign language classes at that time, so I thought like, oh, I could work with the deaf population and like really get into that because the Georgia School for the Deaf is 10 miles from where I grew up. So I had always been around the deaf community. And I say all that to say, when I got to grad school, I got placed at a private practice that private practice / nonprofit agency for the deaf community in Baton Rouge.
Wow.
And yeah, very niche, very, very niche. And I was extremely fortunate to just like kind of drop myself in the deaf community. My supervisor is like literally the most incredible person in the whole world. And if I ever win the lottery, I'm going to give her half of my money so that she can take care of these kids.
Wow.
No, seriously, I learned, it was like the first time I think I truly learned that there are pieces of our population that are extremely underserved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I was witnessing it.
Yeah.
Really witnessing it. There were these kids that were like graduating from the deaf school with a 3rd grade reading level, but you could compare that to kids in New York at this really, or Austin, a more comparable city in the South, and they're graduating on a 12th grade reading level. You know, what's going on? Why is this happening? But she was doing individual therapy for deaf children.
Wow.
Directly in their language. And so I was, it was incredible.
I like chills.
I know. I seriously
know.
got chills too.
Yeah. Shout out to Paula Rodriguez. She is literally
a
changing
badass.
lives.
Literally angel on this earth.
Yeah.
She is an angel among humans. It's incredible. And so I learned a lot about that population, kind of like how they experience the world differently, you know, and all the while I'm doing that, I'm also, I'm insane. I was going to grad school, had a practicum, also working a part-time job.
This is like the social work story, though. I feel like Taylor, same for you, same for me. It's like to make it through, right?
Yeah.
So you were doing very similar, like practicum, working part-time job, or maybe more than that, I'm not sure, and also going to school.
Yeah.
Wow.
Definitely through undergrad, I was going to school, working a full-time job as, you know, at a country club. So I was also doing that. I was like going and seeing these foster kids, and then at 4 o'clock having to drive to a country club.
Wow,
and,
the contrast.
Oh yeah. That's a whole other separate story because there was a hot moment in my life where I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to make any money. Maybe I should just stick with being in the country club world and become a som or a beverage manager, you know, like all these different things. And I had a really, really bad day one day, and I was just like looking around, and I was like, I am just like perpetuating this inequality of wealth, and I can't be a part of this anymore. And I can't do it. Yeah. I can't believe I was thinking all of that stuff at 24, but when you're like, and you guys understand, when you're plopped in your practicum, I swear to God, like opens up your whole mind.
I know.
Because they're in front of you. You can't ignore it. You can't run away.
Right.
You're like, okay, this is really happening in front of me. So I was back to when I was in grad school, my part-time job was actually a mental health technician at the hospital in Baton Rouge. So I was working in the ER. And that is kind of my segue into my first job after I graduated with my MSW. They moved me from being a mental health tech to being at that hospital. It's called a COPE specialist, COPE. It's basically just an ER social worker. But, that job started me out at $17 an hour.
Okay. Did you have your bachelor's at that point?
Master's,
Yeah.
right?
Bachelor's and my master's. But that was
I mean, this is what, as you go through the jobs that you had, if you can share a little bit more detail about what you made, like what your salaries were. I know Taylor and I did that as well. But so right out of your master's program, you're making $17 an hour. What is that per year?
17. I was just about to do the
Yeah.
calculation.
Yeah.
Keep in
Do the
mind, that's the
calculations.
most money I've ever made.
Right. So
$35,360.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I'm rich. Like, I can do anything.
Right.
what year was that? Like, when did you get your master's?
2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wait, did you feel, so you felt like you were rich? Like you didn't think that you were like, what is this salary? Like, with my master's, you were like, this is amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's ridiculous. And so, especially now.
I mean, it's like our frame of reference, it's like, if that's the most money you've made, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Right.
Yep. And I was splitting my time. So I was working 2 days a week at a practicum that I was at. So I was doing 2 days a week doing like some case management for some of the deaf population there, because I still really wanted to be there. They were paying me $13, $12 an hour because they had no money. And then I was working part-time in the ER and picking up shifts. So I was doing shift work in the ER. Wow. And they had like they had not incentive pay, but shift differential. So if I worked after 6 p.m., I got $3 extra an hour. And if I worked after 6 p.m. on the weekends, I got $5 extra an hour. So I was pretty much always picking. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like we had I remember this girl that I worked with, she worked Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 7 p to 7 a shift. And it was a huge difference in her pay.
Right.
Yeah. Huge difference.
That's like $8 more an hour.
Yep.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and it is. And I was working the 4P to 4A shift. So from 4 to 6, I would make $17 an hour. And, you see what I'm saying. Shift work is a gift and a curse, because you can really make a lot of money, but then it's still shift work. But yeah, working in the ER, and if I was going to give any social worker any advice that might not know what they want to do with their lives, like go work in the ER, you'll see every single thing you can ever imagine. Everything that I learned in school, everything in the DSM, every type of crisis intervention skill, you're going to use it. It's going to happen in the ER. And I'm so thankful that I did that, but I'm so grateful I don't work in the ER
anymore. I've done my ER share, and it's a beast.
Yeah, this particular unit in Baton Rouge was really interesting because it was a lockdown unit, and it was people that would be on. Every state calls this something different, but a 72-hour hold.
Right.
So I was doing the initial psychosocial assessment of like what's going on with you, what brought you to the ER, and where are you now. So we would do all of that. I would get them placed in a mental health facility, and then they'd be with us for 3 days and then move on. But I was at some point while I'm living in Baton Rouge, I decided I don't want to live there anymore, and I moved to New Orleans. And then I'm driving back and forth from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, like 5 days a week, and it was killing me. And so I decided that I needed to find a job in New Orleans, which led me to my next job at what was called Behavioral Health Group. And I took a 50-cent pay cut. So that job started me out at $16.50.
Okay.
Again, thought I was rolling in it. Even though I took a pay cut, but I was like, oh man, I'm going to save so much in gas, and I'll just try it out. But this was a methadone clinic, and I didn't really know a lot about methadone. But I'll tell you, I only stayed there for 3 months. It was probably the worst job I've ever had in my life.
Oh my God.
What year was it? What year was it when you then transitioned to this methadone clinic? 2016 was your first kind of job right outside your master's, and then what year did you kind of make $16.50?
I wonder if I have my resume. I feel like it's 2017.
Pull up the resume.
I feel like it was 2017.
So
I was not there for very long. I was there for 3 months. But I don't regret it at all, because through that whole process, I had like a panic moment where I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I can't be here anymore. And I'm literally in my office, door closed, applying for all of these different jobs. And I'd always wanted to work in the medical field. So through my bachelor's program and my master's program, you fill out your top 3 choices of where you want your practicum to be. And mine would always be a hospital. I want to know what it's like to work in a hospital. What's up with medical social work? And I just never got matched. There were other people that got picked before me. And so when I was applying for jobs, I saw kidney transplant social work job. And I thought, that is the most niche job I have ever heard of. what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And luckily I applied and I got it, and I got more money. And so I think I started out there at $23 an hour.
Okay.
And I can tell you, when I left that job, I can't tell you how much it was an hour, but I left making $48,000 a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did you leave?
2020.
Goodness gracious.
I'm really shocked at how low that is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If you interview anybody else from the South in social work, you'll be appalled at the money that we would make. And so the other side of this coin is that you have to have a master's degree to work at any hospital in the country.
Exactly. Right?
You
have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have no other option. And not to mention, if you want any type of significant pay raise, you have to get your LCSW. So, which is, as you guys are well aware, more money added on top of it, because, you know, a supervisor should be compensated for their time, but you have to pay for it. It's pretty rare that
you have to pay for your, you know, curriculum that you want to, I mean, you know, study resources, which is hundreds of dollars. I know here in Oregon, like, registering for the exam and all of that, like paying for the license once you get it, it's like $300. Who has that kind of money? We ain't got that kind of money.
Yeah,
we ain't got that kind of money. Not when you're making $48,000 a year.
Not when you're making $48,000.
And you have student loans, and you have, you know, your rent, and you maybe have a car payment, and it's and you I mean, how much did your master's cost?
Couldn't tell you. Blocked it out.
Okay.
Don't know.
That's okay.
It's out of my mind.
I can tell you exactly how much I owe in student loans, and we can get into that, because
Yeah.
this is kind of like right around this time is where I start really understanding the financial choices that I had made and the mistakes that I made. Neither of my parents, you know, really talked about it. They followed what society had been saying, and they gave me and both of my brothers this same advice. Oh, if you get your degree, you'll get a well-paying job and you'll be able to pay it off. Don't worry about it. Not really fully understand that I can't file for bankruptcy on these loans. They also don't make enough money to support me. So I have to work a full-time job, but I got to figure out a time to find, I have to figure out a way to study.
Yeah.
When do I do that? When I work, you know, nights, and I'm up until 12 or 2 a.m. and have to go to class at 9 the next day, you know, and I only have one day off a week, which is Monday, but I'm in class, you know, there's like all of this stuff going on. But I'd had a boyfriend while I was in Athens who was kind of the first person who planted the seed about the mistakes that I was making, because my parents had given me the advice to just take out a private student loan. Take out a private student loan, and that can pay for your rent for the whole year, so you're not worried about working an extra shift to afford your rent. Which is comical to me now, because I mean, not for the mistake that I made, but what's comical to me now is my rent was like $300.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
And like, I was stressed out about it. Like, please. Like, now I would have been fine. I should have never taken out my private student loans. Like, I was working enough that I would have totally been able to afford that every month. But I didn't have that perspective. And that boyfriend at the time caught me filling out a private student loan application, and he was like, "What are you doing? Do you understand what interest is? Do you understand what that means?" I should also mention he was getting his finance degree.
You're like, okay.
So I listened to him, and I was like, "Oh, you're right. Oh my God, I have 3 of these." And he was like, "You have 3? What do you mean? Stop doing that. Like, don't take out any more private loans. Like, here's what you need to do." Was I ready to hear that? No. I didn't want to hear my boyfriend telling me that I'd made all these mistakes. And, you know, he had no idea that that's what my family had been advising me, because I thought everybody was doing it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And I don't mean to interject, but I don't even know if it's a mistake. I kind of feel like this is an issue with financial literacy for just people in general, and it's kind of you're making decisions based on the information that was provided to you at the time from your parents who are authority figures, like you're figuring this out. And I think a lot of people find themselves in these situations, and it's not really, I think, a mistake necessarily per se. It's lack of financial literacy and knowing what to do. And I wasn't educated on like finances or interest or investing or whatever. When I was making $35,000 out of college, whatever, too, I was like, I'm rich, right? Same kind of feeling. And you're like, wait a minute, right? So totally get, like, it's complicated. It's a complicated feeling, a complicated system though too, and we just don't educate. And we're not allowed to talk about it as social workers either, or at least, I don't know. We're trying to change that.
We are now.
We're talking about it.
Thank God. Yeah, we do need to talk about it, because something Taylor and I have talked about a lot, and I know I've shared this feeling with you, Taylor, is unfortunately, I feel like social workers as a whole have put us in this position, and we have to get ourselves out. Because if you think all the way back to the original social work professions in Chicago at Hull House, like when they were doing their whole thing, they wanted to help. And unfortunately, helping positions will take less because we care more about the feelings of other people, what they're going through. They're less fortunate than us. How can we help? You know what I'm saying? And it has perpetuated throughout the development of social work as a career. And I think, like, and I say that also knowing that I did that. Like, I'm going to tell you guys a really crazy story that happened at Ochsner, because it was like the first light bulb that I was like, oh shit, I did not do any of the stuff that I could have been doing to get a higher pay when I first got hired on. But I accepted the $23 an hour because I was like, oh my God, that's more money than $16.50. Like, I'm getting a raise. It's a super cool job. And I didn't negotiate at all when I could have, because I kept thinking, oh, well, I only have like a year and a half of experience. This is what I'm going to make. Didn't negotiate. And then as I'm moving through the transplant world and learning all of these different things, feeling really confident in my decision to go to this job, really loving it, feeling like this is the career that I want to be in, I start like questioning my other coworkers, like, what do you make? What's going on? Through doing that, I found out that a male that just got hired got like $5,000 more than me a year, and we had equal experience. And because he negotiated, and I could have gotten that, but I didn't do it. And so I talked to my boss about it, and she was like, I'm sorry, we're not in a place to do this right now, blah, blah, blah. So I started applying for a second job because I had a car that was not functioning very well. I can tell you, like, if I pulled up my, I had like a makeshift spreadsheet of all of my bills and like everything I owed. I had $200 left over every month. And I was splitting an apartment with my boyfriend, and trying to save for another car. So I'm applying for other jobs that I can just like pick up a shift on the weekend, and not knowing that my boss's boss is getting flagged for this. She's getting notifications. She's like getting 8 notifications from me applying for these jobs internally. And she calls me into her office and is like, Sam, why are you applying for these other jobs?
This is your boss's this is your boss's boss?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And she goes, are we not paying you enough?
I'm sorry.
No.
I can't. Well, the action of applying implies I'm not making enough. I'll let you answer that question. Wow.
Yeah. And so she pulled my other boss in, who is an amazing human. And I'll get back to her, but they were like, okay, let's figure something out. You know, like you shouldn't feel like you need to work a second job when you already work 5 days a week.
Wow.
Both of them are women, so keep that in mind. And so they they gave me a $5,000 raise, and, I was super thankful for that. But I was still struggling because I really needed another car. And somewhere around 2019, I think I had saved up like $1,200 that I could use for a down payment, which was a lot of money to me. It was the most money I had ever. Yeah. It's the most money I had ever saved up in my life. And I was able to get another car. So now I've tacked on a car payment on top of student loans, bills, all of this stuff because I desperately needed a car. But ultimately, somewhere around 2019, my partner and I came out to Oregon for a wedding. And while we were here, we were like, let's just see what jobs are like out here. And we both doubled our salary. Well, he didn't double his salary. I doubled my salary. Like, we learned, like, oh my God, they pay social workers so much more money. And like, in just like talking to him, and kind of everything that we had been talking about up until that point, I was in so much debt at that point. Like, I had stopped paying my private student loans, couldn't afford them. If I pulled, actually, you know what? I think I have it right here. So I had 3 $7,000 loans through Wells Fargo, and the interest rate was anywhere from 10 to 12%.
Oh my!
Yeah,
that is a high. That's high.
Yeah,
yeah. That is high.
That is high.
Yeah, no, that's the reality. Like, that's what people face with private loans. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going through a lot of shame and guilt about it, and I wasn't paying them. So from pretty much the time that I graduated until 2020, I was not paying on these loans. Obviously, my credit score took a huge hit, which resulted in me getting a 10% interest rate on my car. So that was really rough. Even though I bought in a...
There's this trickle-down effect, right? It's like, we're not being paid well as social workers. We have these student loans, regardless of if they're private or not. Some people's federal loans their payments are so high that they can't afford them too. So it's like, well, I can't pay for that, so I'm not going to. But I also need a new car. But now, since I didn't pay on my student loans because I'm not getting paid enough money as a social worker, my credit's being affected. And now I have this like high interest rate on my car, which is going to cost me more money. And the reason why I have this high interest was because I couldn't pay for this other payment because I don't have enough money. Like, it's just this cycle that is really frustrating.
Yeah, and then you're sitting with like the shame and embarrassment of like, I should have known better, or why didn't I know better, when realistically there was no education on financial literacy in high school that should be across the board provided in high school. Same with mental health options across the board in high school. You should know what loans you're opening, what the interest rates are, what that means before you ever take a loan for college. Like, I just don't even understand that.
Yeah,
it's just
and then
crazy
you're
to me.
Paid these low salaries.
And then you get paid these low salaries, which does not make up for how much you pay for a master's in social work. A master's in social work should never be $90,000. Period. Ever. It should never be $90,000. There should be So all the things are just stacked up, and then you're sitting with that feeling of shame and embarrassment on top of it. It's just bullshit. That's all I got for it.
Bullshit.
Yeah,
it was really rough. It was so rough. The one thing that I figured out early on was public service loan forgiveness. Thank God. And so at least my federal loans I got on a income-based repayment plan. So I could pay my federal loans, but I couldn't pay these private loans. And so, at some point, I finally talked to my partner about it, and he's super smart and really good with money. So we sat down and we talked about how I could tackle these private loans. And ultimately, it came down to, I have to make more money. There's no way around it. And I was he also read like a letter that I had gotten, because at that point I was just throwing them away, ignoring it, ignoring every call. They were calling my job, they were calling my dad, they were calling everybody.
Whoa.
Oh yeah. And finally I read one of the letters, because I was like, all right, I have to deal with this. And something interesting, and I hope that I can spread this information out to people that have private loans, is some private student loan banks will offer what's called a discharge settlement.
Okay.
So they will offer, if you pay a percentage of the original loan, they will discharge the rest. Now, there is a tax problem that happens later with that. But so for my $7,000 loan, one of them, and I did it in a domino effect, but I'll get to that. They offered me, okay, if you pay 60% of the original loan, we will discharge the other 40%. No interest, just pay it. And I was like, okay, because you have to think, these banks just want some money. If they can get at least a little bit of money out of you, they're okay.
Yeah.
So I can't remember. I used to keep up really well with this piece of paper that had everything broken down, because I had written it while I was on the phone with the guy. It came out to $179 a month for 2 years for one loan. And then I would roll over and do the next one. And so I was like, okay, well, I have a 6-year plan of how to get all of these private student loans discharged. Okay, great. So now I can tackle this, because at that point, me and my partner are also talking about buying a house, but we can't put my name on the house because I have a terrible credit score.
Oh, these layers, right?
Yeah.
Of just like feeling that burden. And that's just,
Yeah, it's awful.
hard. That's hard.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So when we made the decision to move out here, Ross got a job pretty quickly, but I was struggling. I kept trying to stay in the transplant world, and I had probably interviewed at one of the big transplant centers here. I interviewed for their heart transplant position, but I wasn't going to get my LCSW in time, because I was also finishing up my LCSW in New Orleans. I had a target finishing date around Thanksgiving, and they wanted me to start in December. So by the time I sat for my test, applied for my license, I wasn't going to have my LCSW in time to be able to work for them. Or even applying for my CSWA here in Oregon, none of it was going to happen in time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't working out. So I didn't get that job. And it took me a while to get another job here. So luckily I got a job at a dialysis center here in Oregon, and they offered me $35 an hour.
Okay.
Which was huge upgrade.
Okay.
So yeah, you jumped from 23 to 35. Yeah, 23
huge
to 35.
upgrade.
Yeah.
35,
yeah.
that's $72,000. Wow.
Yeah, 48.
Then it must have been more than that, because I know that it might have been more than that. I think, anyways, it doesn't matter. I know that it was a lot, and I couldn't believe it. Now, granted, we did move into an apartment that was significantly more, and the taxes here are a lot, and we're totally living in a more expensive place. But I was finally seeing a little bit of hope. I was like, okay, so I won't have $200 left over every month. I should also mention, now that I'm done with my supervision, I don't have to pay a supervisor anymore, because that was costing me $200 a month. And my supervisor was charging me a reasonable amount, $50 an hour. But when I sat down and did the math, Louisiana is one of those states that requires 100 direct supervision hours, but like 500, 760 clinical hours. So an insane amount of clinical hours on top of getting your supervision. And I think I ended up paying my supervisor somewhere around $5,000, just like straight to him. So that was also wrapped up in why I was not able to afford anything. But we lived here. I made that much money. I really did not like working at DaVita for a lot of different reasons. If I'm being honest, probably because I just wanted to be back in transplant. Like, that's where I'm supposed to be. I love that world, and we can talk about that. But I think that ultimately DaVita really helped me understand like the steps that it takes a patient to get even towards the transplant process. Because at that point I had only worked with recipients in kidney transplant, and I knew they were all on dialysis, but I didn't quite really understand what dialysis meant from a psychosocial perspective. And so I worked at DaVita for about 10 months. And it really helped me understand like their day-to-day life and what they have to sacrifice. And then we talk about transplant and all of these different things. And I really love, I call it specialty social work. Like Taylor and I have talked about this a lot. I feel like when I was in grad school, nobody had let me know that there was something more. And there's no hate towards case managers, but there was something more than just being a case manager or working with kids or CPS or like all of these different jobs. I knew that I ultimately wanted to, I knew I needed to find like a field of social work that I actually felt like I could do some good in. Like this was one of the few jobs I feel like I literally witness somebody come in that is sick. They go through this really difficult workup. They make the decision with their healthcare providers that this is the right choice for them, their body, their spirit. Let's go through this together. They get the transplant, and then I literally watched them physically get better. They can start going back to work. They're not dealing with the 3-day-a-week dialysis schedule. Now they have to go through a lot on the recipient side, but I feel like it's like the one field of social work where I saw happiness. I know it sounds terrible.
No,
but you
know,
we all have that. We all have that.
Yeah.
When the social worker gets called to the room, it's not for anything fun. So it's like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
So this was like one of the few jobs that I was like, oh my God, I was literally a part of a team that helped this person get better. And it worked. And it was awesome. So it was like one of the few times so at that moment I knew like I have to do this for the rest of my life, like period. But I digress.